Welcome, dear listeners, to my channel. This story takes us into the world of personal ambition and privilege on the darker side of humanity, as we experience it through the journey of a young nobleman caught between a galaxy dominated by status and status. All my powers are controlled by a deceased nobleman. But in this story, from the point of view of the nobility, the price of pursuing power and succumbing to arrogance can be high. This adventure leads us into a confrontation with authority, a battle for status, and ultimately humanity's internal hostility. Are you ready to embark on this dark journey? We invite you to explore the world of Etan Azel. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Etan listens to the slave trader's story, makes a pitch, and then stops him. Raise your hand and see what you have. He demanded, as usual. Slave traders were very docile when it came to dealing with the Goqen nobility. The slaver bowed his head and answered as you wished. Lord Etan laughed. He answered yes and was still not used to being called a lord. He only recently reached the age of majority and eventually inherited all of his deceased father's lands and property. His maternal grandfather took charge of his estate after his father's death and raised Etan in every capacity. Noble and necessary humility was not one of these abilities. He was often harsh toward those he felt were beneath him. He viewed men as particularly inferior and expected them to be different. After all, he is a Goqen aristocrat. Only royalty is above their rank, and he provides food and drink to the Goqens, and those who have it flaunt it and hold it in their hands. No one wanted to come in. Etan's father achieved his position through his abilities and extraordinary service to the king. Etan believed the same skills were passed down to him. After all, the gods gave priority to the nobility over everyone else. The first thing he needed was to prove himself by acquiring new slaves to cultivate his land. What good is a title if you can't show it off to others? So he sat here, escorted by his grumpy butler and bodyguard, unwilling to admit that he was overwhelmed. He consulted with his manager as to which slaves would be most useful from a selection of common types of slaves, and the manager negotiated the price. Etan casually looked around and saw another slave inside the ship. Even though he was already locked in a cage, his arms and legs were tied. Mr. Etan could not see her face because she had a hood over her head. He saw a slave trader. Why not? One of the people introduced, Lord Slave, replied, "The man in the ship's hood," said Etan. "Ah, you mean the human," to whom the slaver answered. "He is on his way to the mines in the Dalari sector? People are too dangerous to serve in any other capacity, especially in this position of mine." I had never heard of the guy until Etan brought him out further. "But mister, he doesn't deserve it." Etan interrupted him and the slaver bowed. "It should be done." He waved to two of his men, who, stunned, pulled their batons from their belts. One of them approached the cage, unlocked it, opened the door, and pulled the shackles to move the slave. One of them remained just out of reach, his baton at the ready. The shackles were slow, but Etan eventually stood up before he could remove his hood as the slaver gave chase. It was revealed that the slaves were also wearing gaku. Why did he go bad? Does he have big fangs? Or is that what Etan asked? "No, Master Hun is just really annoying and rude," the slaver replied. He turns to his manager. "Have you ever heard of these people?" "No, sir," the steward answered before turning to the slave trader. "Where are these people?" The Dorian Sector Administrator KX 2489 system demanded a system. People called it a soul, and it was started by slave traders. It would not be surprising if this were the case. I've never seen it. They're low-level, technical, and not out of the system yet. However, the Zulun are known to capture individuals for research and experimentation purposes. Unsuitable specimens are sold into slavery or the battlefield. Etan stood tall and enjoyed the story of the fighting arena. They are honest, and if he had his own martial artist who would bring him glory, he would know the truth about the martial arts used in boxing, how they perform in matches, and whether they have any training or not. I imagined that I would become an enthusiast. They are better than average, the slaver continued. Their planet has above-average gravity, so they are stronger than most planets. The slaver pointed to the former Etan bodyguard. Although they cannot compete with humans in terms of strength, they are stronger than anyone else, but in the end, the two Vaso slaves won. Vasos people are intelligent, especially considering how primitive his people are, but no better than the grumpy butler. Her stamina is in the middle of most box fighters. Overall, humans are just average pit fighters, which makes them especially dangerous. The slave trader looked confused and asked, "What do you mean?" Did the slave trader answer? "They do not rely on just one ability, but on all at once. This ability is even more dangerous since he was one of the warriors when they captured him." Etan thought for a moment before speaking. "I will make him my steward and slave." They looked at him in surprise, but His Highness the butler said something. "That's not good." The slave trader tried to answer. Etan gave them both his most destructive look. "I said, I will take him without a choice. They will both comply with his request, and I will. Please take the rest with you." Etan Corporation responded to this announcement. Once the payment and ownership transfer formalities were completed, slave traders' attitudes improved. The ruler took his slaves and ran away. The human's hood was replaced, but the shackles were removed. Otherwise, it would take a whole day to fix him on the slave nail. The steward turned to Etan. "Sir, is it wise to have such a dangerous person on the premises?" Etan laughed. "He doesn't plan to stay at the facility for long. I'm going to have him fight in the pit." The manager smiled at this great idea. "Lord, I will arrange his next boat reservation." Etan followed him with a smug look on his face. "I hear that the slaver is not as strong as my bodyguards and cannot outsmart you, and that I am more than smart enough to deal with him." It was midnight. When he was woken up by a noise, he was angry that his sleep was disturbed. "I didn't know what it was, but I thought it was a loud thud." He stood up, put on his cloak, and muttered to himself about his punishment. The criminal would be greeted immediately upon arriving at the front door. He opened a slit that looked into the hallway. If I didn't open the door, I could barely see the two guards on either side of the door. "What was that noise?" he demanded, but none of the guards answered. There was still no answer, and Etan closed the slot and opened the door. "I said if you don't answer, I'll send you to the box." He left the room and looked at the guard. "Now answer me." Then Etan realized they would never answer. Both guards were found dead, their throats slit, and blood strewn across the walls and floor. It was still dripping from the wound, running down her chest and pulling her to her feet in a state of shock. When he noticed a thin but strong wire wrapped around their necks, he wondered why they were still standing. The wire cut deep into her flesh and Etan, ending at the access hatch in her ceiling. He turned his head around, looking for danger, then went back into the room, slammed the door, and locked it. He looked around for a weapon, but it was too dark. He turned on the light and saw the manager's head. It was stuck in one of the bedposts, and he started backing towards the door when he encountered something solid. He felt another being's breath on his neck and a hand pulling his head back. "I should have asked." The slaver was spoken to in his ear before he felt a sharp line of fire on his neck, found it difficult to breathe, and disappeared into the darkness. Dear viewers, thank you for listening to this story. I am grateful that you have joined me on this journey through the remote and complex realms of power, privilege, and humanity. We hope you found our adventures in the world of the Etan Azel interesting and thought-provoking. The story's ending contains an important message about our inner darkness and how we perceive others. It reminds us of the dangers of ambition and arrogance and emphasizes the need to treat each other better for a better future. Until the next adventure, don't forget to subscribe and share this story with others. Good night and safe travels.